happiness is acceptance of what is. And we all know there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, there's going to be U-turns, there's going to be roadblocks. That's just life. But the acceptance of what the universe brings us and our ability to just stay still within that, to me, that's happiness.
Geoff, it is such a pleasure to hear that British accent.
Good to see you, Lawrence, and thank you very much for having me here today. And yes, I hope I give you a little flavor of home, you see.
Well, listen, Geoff, you wrote a book called From Fear of Failure to Flying High. And I think that's such a beautiful title because I see it in myself. I've had to overcome a lot of fear. And actually, I went deep down the path of martial arts. One of the reasons is I wanted to face my fears. And when I was fighting, I realized there was two different types of people that would fight. There would be the people like me that treated it like a sport and they were scared. They didn't want to do it, but they knew if you do it, you'd have some self-growth. And then you have the people that if they weren't fighting professionally, they'd be fighting on a Saturday night after a few beers at the pub. So you have those two different things. But I just think that the concept of fear holding people back is just such a fascinating, everyone has to deal with a certain elements of fear in their lives and overcoming it.
Absolutely. And I discovered through a lot of personal growth and self-development work, I discovered that I actually was the result of a family pattern. Because I loved my father dearly, he's passed away, but in a way, my father was the example of the man I didn't want to become, because he was a man with great talent in various things. I mean, he was chosen as a young man to play professional soccer.
Oh, wow.
He had 2 trials at a professional soccer team were arranged for him, and he didn't turn up for either trial. Now,
wow.
What was that? When you look at that was fear of failure. That was not wanting to put himself out there. And the acorn never falls far from the tree. And my early life, opportunities came to me. In fact, I'll tell you the story of me possibly starting to play professional soccer, whereby I was spotted. I was going to come over to America, play in the North American League. It was all arranged. I was going to play for the Atlanta Chiefs. And 7 days before flying out to the States to start this new career, new life, I dislocated my right ankle and broke 3 bones in my right foot. Now, some would say bad luck. Some would say, oh, it's just one of those quirks of fate. I would say, actually, there was a fear within me, a fear of failure that sabotaged me.
Can I ask you, Geoff, how did you break those bones? What was it sort of about?
It was a tackle. It was playing soccer in the UK. And it was the most innocuous tackle you could ever come across. It wasn't particularly heavy. And I truly believe I perpetuated that. I created that. The work I've done subsequently on seeing how people can injure themselves and their emotional state is often reflected by physical injury. The two go together, undoubtedly go together.
So when you look back now, many years later, do you think there was part of you that was scared of that, the pressure of playing in the US?
Undoubtedly. And I mean, the reason I've written the book was my family background was a family background of very little ambition, staying small in the world. I think my parents would have liked me to have 2.4 children, a white picket fence, and most of my family were teachers. They were educators. And that was after coming out of university, I became a teacher. I taught modern languages. But somewhere within me, I wanted more. There was something, I'm very different from the other people within my family. And that fear of failure was still with me. It was undoubtedly genetic, but I knew I had to break out of that. And the book, From Fear of Failure to Flying High, I've built businesses. Like you, I've done martial arts. I've traveled a lot and I've broken the mold. And I sometimes think many of us are brought into a family to kind of heal some of the patterns that are in that family. That sounds arrogant, and I don't mean, there's no question of superiority or inferiority here. There's just different choices. And my choice was to break the mold and stand above the parapet.
I love that, Geoff. The idea of every generation, you're trying to build on each other. So, for instance, my grandfather came from, as a teenager, he was smuggled out of Nazi Germany just when the war was starting. And it was just like, let's get out of here and smuggled to England because it was just chaos in Germany at the time. And so he grew up a German in England, a broken man. He didn't speak the language. My last name, Dunning, he just opened the phone book and put his finger because he wanted an English sounding last name. And so he grew up a very bitter, angry man. And so my dad's childhood, subsequently, they didn't have much money. They were very poor. But whatever money they had, my dad would tell these stories of, I'd be at the dinner table and my grandfather would be eating steak while my dad and his 3 siblings would be having milk and bread and sugar. And they would dip the bread in the milk and then the sugar in it. So they have very bad nutrition. He didn't have much. He grew up in very little love. And then so when I look back at my childhood, we didn't have much in the sense of lower middle class, I guess, financially, but I had a home full of love. And he did so much of a better job than his father. But now he's at an age where he's very much like he just wants to pursue his own dreams before he's too old. He loves to go hiking and do his own thing. And part of me is like, he's got a 4-year-old grandson. Do you not want to spend more time with your grandson? He doesn't seem too interested in it. But then I think, man, he did such a much better job as a parent as the childhood that he had. And then now it's my job with my sons to try and build on that and do a better job. So I don't think it's arrogant at all. I really love that. You're trying to, you said, heal the trauma of the family or the limitations of the family. I think it's natural, right? That every family, you're going to grow up. If your parents had limitations and limiting beliefs, they're going to imprint that onto their kids, whether they mean to or not. It's just going to happen.
Yes. And I see a frustration. There was a frustration in me, and I see a frustration in some of the people I coach and I work with, that they almost crave, I wish I'd been brought up in total poverty, lived in a cardboard box on the streets, or I wish I'd lived in a house full of abuse, because then they look at Oprah Winfrey and Tony Robbins and the life. If I'd had that, then I'd have the fire in the belly and the motivation to be ambitious, to step outside the parapet. And I had that thought because my background was actually so bland, so average. And then where was my motivation going to come from? And I didn't have that motivation as a young man. And I've kind of told you about the footballing accident, the soccer accident. I have a saying, it's not my saying, it's a saying that I live by, but, from out of the darkness comes the dawn. And it truly is our darkest moments where the light comes very soon afterwards and the dawn appears. Because what that footballing accident did, the first book that I picked up after that accident was Dan Millman's The Peaceful Warrior. I don't know if you know that book at all.
I read that many years ago. One of my best friends, it's his favorite book. I've got to reread that.
Really? Yes. Yeah. Well, I read it in one sitting. And the reason it resonated with me was Dan had a motorcycling accident which shattered his leg. And he thought that was his career as a gymnast over and done with. But using very natural methods, using a bit of martial arts, a bit of Tai Chi, massages, all sorts of alternative methods, he healed himself and he went on to become a world champion gymnast. So I read that book after having shattered my ankle and going, if he can do it, I can do it. What are his methods? So that really led me into my personal growth and self-development journey. And so that's where my dawn came from, that you name the methodology, you name the personal growth method, and I've probably done it. I became an absolute junkie of all the workshops, the books, and everything.
So, Geoff, did you ever think about trying to pursue soccer once you had healed from your injury?
I didn't. I was told I could have been a coach. I could have coached others. But there's a little bit within me that if I'm not doing it at as high a level as I possibly can, And I've got to admit, there was a lot of fear around. Anytime anyone came near the ankle, it was like, and I mean, I have subsequently played soccer. I mean, I was told I would have arthritis and I'd need it bolted, bolts through the ankle and all sorts of things. And this is where my martial arts comes into it. I haven't needed any of those. And again, through natural methods and martial arts, I've remained fit and healthy, but I didn't contemplate trying again. And back in those days, I'm getting on a bit. Back in those days, the techniques of healing and mending weren't as great as they are now.
No, totally. I understand that.
Yeah.
How many people, because I mean, obviously you said you help a lot of people see their potential a bit more. How many people do you think are constrained by particularly the fear aspect, whatever dreams they have, whatever potential they have? Do you think fear is the biggest thing holding them back? Or I guess the other side will be, or is it just they don't really have the right opportunity?
Such an interesting question. And I think it's through my attendance at personal growth seminars. I'll tell you what I witnessed and what led me again on this path. I would sit in these personal growth seminars and the teacher would give the instructions, great advice, great support. And I would see perhaps a very small percentage go off and do exactly as the guru said, go off. And they're what I call the straight liners, or they would go off and just do as they talk and be a success. Okay? The larger percentage wouldn't do anything. And they either wouldn't do anything, they try a little bit, and then they go, this doesn't work for me. It works for all the others, but it doesn't work for me. How many people do I come across who buy a course and never complete the course, or they do the first lesson and go, no, this isn't going to work. And to me, this is all fear of failure. This is fear of putting too much effort in and then feeling, oh my goodness, that was wasted effort. And the sabotage is there right from the get-go. And judging by the people who come to me for help and judging from the people that become serial workshop attendees, as I was in my early days, I could write this book because it was me. I was doing the same. I was sitting there. Some people look at a Tony Robbins and say, yeah, you've motivated me to bring the best out of myself. And others go, I'm not as tall as you, as big as you, as commanding as you. I haven't got as white teeth as you. I can't do it the way you do it. And it's those people that are my speciality because I kind of know them very well because it was me. So, to answer your question, there's a lot of regret in the world. There's a lot of resentment that people aren't making it.
I always think I've had a lot of ups and downs in my life, and I don't regret any of the failures because at least I was trying. And that's what I love that Theodore Roosevelt, The Man in the Arena, where he talks about even if at worst you fail, but you fail while being in the arena by striving and trying. And there's nothing worse than not even getting in the arena. And that's always been the philosophy I live my life by. So what are some of the people, someone's listening to this and their life feels like one of quiet desperation and they're just not where they want to be. And they know that they have more to offer the world. Because I know exactly what you mean about people going to the courses and maybe there's 20 steps and they do one or two and then they just fall off. How do you get them doing all the steps that they need to grow? Because I think that most people intuitively know some of the things that they have to do for self-improvement, but it's a big gulf between knowing what you have to do and actually doing it on a daily basis.
And isn't that the human malaise, isn't it? That we all know what we should be doing, but so why don't we do it? That's the puzzle of a human being, isn't it? That we know what to do, but we don't do it. So it's obvious that I'm going to say this and your audience will understand me. I am a coach, but I'm not trying to promote coaching. But I do believe if you're not doing it on your own, you do need a coach. You can get onto the coattails of a coach's confidence in you. For a person who doesn't have confidence and doesn't have that, where do I start is the big question I get from a lot of people. Where do I start? They can initially get that spark of confidence from the coach they're working with. And I do believe they have to find somebody they can resonate with. I do believe in personal one-to-one coaching, even if it's just to get somebody started, because it's those first steps that are so hard for people. So that's one thing that they could do. The other thing is, I use this analogy, you've probably heard this analogy before, driving somewhere. So if we're driving from Chicago to Denver, okay, and you're driving at night and you've got the lights on, you set off from Chicago, you can't see Denver, but you can see the headlights in front of you. You just follow the headlights in front of you. And so many of the people that I work with as a coach, they're looking at Denver the whole time. They're not looking at the headlights. They're not looking at the first step. They're looking at the big goal at the end of it. And it's scaring them the whole time because their head keeps telling them, I'm not going to get to Denver. I'm not going to get to Denver. And if they just come back to following the headlamps, the lights, they'll get there. And so, that's another way of saying small steps. When everybody's different, that's where personality comes in, that certain people can take bigger steps than others. And that's for the coach to see and help with. Does that all make sense?
It completely does. And you just reminded me of a memory I had. One of my wife's friends was staying with us a few years ago, and she was complaining she couldn't meet a guy. But she had so much work to work on herself first. And I remember thinking that analogy is just perfect. Like, so many people are aiming for that big thing that's 75 steps away, when really they should be looking at steps 2, 3, and 4, because they're going to get either overwhelmed by the enormity of where they have to go to, or they just have so many things to work on before they get to their big goal. And it's like, I'm kind of picking on her because you could just see it's always easier from the outside. Like, I've been in situations where I'm sure my friends were looking at me thinking, Jesus, Lawrence, like, you know what you got to do and you're doing the wrong thing. But when we're in it, it's harder to see. But when you're on the outside looking at the situation from non-biased vantage point, you can see that if this girl wants to attract somebody, she has to work on herself first. So she's attractive to the person she wants to be. She needs to grow into the person she wants to be to attract the partner that she wants. And I think that's a dating analogy, but it can be used in anything, right? If you want to, like, that's the reason that if you win the lottery, so many times that they squander all their wealth because they're just given this lump sum. It's very different from if they took 5 years to build a business that made money and then they would know how to cope with that money, right? Because they didn't miss out all the steps in the meantime.
Absolutely, 100%. I was incredibly lucky in the COVID year. Again, people collide for a reason. And I came across a guy, an American by the name of Dr. Leonard Laskow. He's written a book, Forgiving Love. And he's a fascinating man. He's retired now and lives in Switzerland. But as a young doctor, he was he was an MD. He worked in a hospital in the States. He also worked as a medic in the Vietnam War. But he had this spiritual side to him. And as a young man, he believed he could heal cancer cells with meditation and various forms of healing. Now, he had to keep this so under the radar back in the 70s, this must have been, because if the authorities had seen him doing this, they'd have struck him off. That would be the end of his medical career. He got to a point where he had the confidence to do this, and a young lady patient came in with a terrible cancerous tumor, and he used his methods with her, and she didn't come back. And he was so worried that had he made her worse, or why hadn't she come back? And it was several months later, he just bumped into her in the hospital. And he said, "How are you? You didn't come back. What?" And she said, "Well, I didn't need to come back. It had all healed up. It had all gone." And the reason I brought him up was your friend who was saying, somebody looking for love. His belief is that all human suffering is just a disconnect between how much we love ourselves. And you're right, that friend of your wife's, you have to work on loving yourself before you can find love elsewhere. And I've worked with people who are seeking a partner or seeking a relationship, And yeah, they have to work on what's holding them back first before you find love. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. So my son is 4 years old, and the last 4 years have been so wonderful. I feel like I've changed my perspective on he's given me so much wonderful different ways of seeing the world. And I feel like I appreciate time so much more when I see every month he develops, and I think I'll never get that month back. So I'm more grateful for my time and the passage of time every day. That he's only 4, but I'm really thinking about what are the lessons and the wisdom I want to give him when he's a teenager. And I think one thing that I really want to stress, I think it's such good advice for anyone. It's kind of along the lines of what you were saying, was the disconnect. You have to love yourself before you can love others. And the easiest way to love yourself is to do things that make you get self-respect. And I think so anything you can do, like, and it kind of comes back to what you and I are both so passionate about, is self-improvement. Like, if you have the discipline to get up and get some exercise and try and eat a bit better, regardless of if you're in college or if you're working, spend a bit of time to read books, to educate yourself, just for the pure joy of being your best self and opening up your horizons. And if you do all these things, that's going to make you respect yourself for having good habits and discipline. And then that's going to be easier for you to be more attractive as a partner. So I think the lessons of what to do if you're single and you want to attract someone who's like your ideal partner, it all comes down to the self-development. And then again, as a parent, I had this wonderful realization. Read all these parenting books when I was a new dad, because I was so clueless. I didn't grow up with younger brothers. I didn't grow up with younger cousins. So I felt like a very uninformed father. And Geoff, the most beautiful lesson I got was, in order to be the best parent, you have to be your best self. And it's not what you tell your kids, it's what they see you doing and how you live your life. They're going to see that every day. So if you tell them one thing, but you're doing another, they're not going to listen to what you're saying. They're going to watch your actions and how you're living your life. So in order to be the best parent, you have to be your best self. And so I joke with my friends and I say, parenting is like a life hack for being the best you. It's incredible. And it's inspired me so much. But I just love that idea of just, if you work on yourself, the dividends are going to be paid throughout all the other aspects of your life. I just think that's such a lovely thing. I find that so inspiring.
Thank you, Ed. And you obviously have a great awareness of how you want to be and how you want your family to be, which I find so admirable. And so just to pick up on what you said there, I work with parents who have teenage sons or daughters, and they come on the phone to me complaining of he or she won't listen to me and they won't listen to a word. And I say to them, no, they won't listen to you, but they're watching everything you do. And I'm now a grandparent, so I've seen it through another generation. And, children learn by osmosis. It truly is. They see their parents' patterns. They pick up. I've had parents who say, so-and-so's so lazy, and they leave their bedroom a mess. And then maybe I'm invited into their room and their kitchen's a mess. And you go, yeah, where do we start here? It's pretty obvious. What you said about teaching discipline and good habits, etc., they're great. I work a lot with people on the inner critic. Let's talk a little bit about the inner critic, because I think it's so important. The inner critic gets a really bad rap in a lot of psychological things, but the inner critic, we have it for a purpose. And I think sometimes my inner critic will tell me, Geoff, you're being stupid. You're being really stupid not being able to do such and such, or I'm being lazy. There are usually 3 reasons for not being able to do something. You're being stupid, you're being lazy, or you're allowing your ego to intervene. And I hold my hand up to knowing that all 3 happen all the time. We're all human. But the trouble with most human beings is they allow their inner critic to beat them up. I'm not perfect enough a parent. I'm not perfect enough a husband, a wife, a grandparent. And again, children see that. Children start making themselves less because they see their parents making themselves less. And to me, when Leonard Lasko talked about self-love is about calming down or quietening down that voice that tells us we messed up, we did something wrong, we may be a success in life, but we suddenly failed in that one thing. have the empathy that you would give yourself as a young child. It's take responsibility. We take responsibility for the things that don't work out, but stop beating ourselves up. And that, to me, is the self-love that most humans are missing.
Geoff, that's beautiful. I remember hearing someone say, when you see an adult who's just an awful screaming or angry or aggressive, the way he sees it is he reframes it. He says, that was just a baby that didn't get enough love. And I thought that was so good. It's like, it's a way of being much more compassionate. And I've actually thought about that self-critic. I've always been my own harshest critic. And I always laugh when people try to critique me. I'm like, you've got nothing on I'm way harder on myself than you could ever be. But I've been thinking about that. If it was the same situation with me or a good friend of mine, I would be so much more generous and charitable to my friend and say, brother, you're human. It's okay. We all make mistakes. Whereas if it's me, I'm much more harder on myself. And so I try and remember that. I try to keep my inner dialogue like I would talk to a good friend and not having that really harsh self-critic.
So true. So it's so necessary. And you said another interesting thing earlier where you said, I want to teach my child, I want to teach and be the best example. It's hard when you're a parent because as a parent, you're in the throes of a busyness of life. I've learned this more as a grandparent than a parent. Like, we adults should look at what we can learn from children. We should reverse it. I mean, my daughter's just given birth. I have a 6-month-old granddaughter. Now, with some people will come in the room and she will hug them, she will cuddle them, she will smile. Another person might come into the room and she'll just cry and move away from them. We don't realize that a child's intuition about other people is pure, absolutely pure. Where do we lose that later on in life? Some people retain it, but some people, when you're interviewing, when you're in HR, when you're interviewing for a job and somebody very clever at saying all the right things, do we lose some of that intuition where a child just goes, I like you? No, I don't like you. And there are lots of other things that I don't know a child who's had to discover their why.
Well, especially, Geoff, today, we just live in an era with so much distraction. And sounds like your daughter's a bit older, so maybe she missed the technology. I just feel like if you're a teenager today with a smartphone, the amount of just distraction and dopamine hits you're getting from all these sites like TikTok and everything you're using, it's so hard to develop. And there's one thing, it's the same. I have 2 dogs, and it's the same. I take my son and the dogs to the park, and it's so nice to see them in the present or just having a good time. And they're so good at being in the present. I think that's a great thing that we as adults, how many times are we worried about the future that hasn't happened or affected by the past that's over? And it's so difficult. And one of the reasons I love martial arts is it's difficult physically and mentally. It forces you to be in the present. And one of the reasons I love podcasting and having a conversation like this is my phone's off, the door's shut, and I'm just present with you. And it's becoming more and more of a commodity just to have that attention with something. And I really do appreciate that. And that's so true. I'm learning that from my son. When he's in the moment and he's just giggling and laughing with glee, it makes me so happy to see that, because that's what he is. He's in the present. I think anything that I've loved in life, it's because you're engrossed in it. It's like you have that flow state that psychiatrists talk about where you're in the moment. And it's becoming harder and harder with all these distractions to get those states.
Absolutely. I came across a statistic, I think it was last week, somebody mentioned this stat to me, that our caveman sort of forefathers, our ancestors, had something like 3,500 decisions to make. I think it's per day. And we are having 35,000 decisions to make per day. I don't know how they work this out, but just take that ratio. And I mean, there were, why did Steve Jobs always wear the same clothes every day? Why does Warren Buffett he has his McDonald's breakfast every morning? Trying to make your life less rather than more, trying to reduce down the decisions we have to make, trying to leverage other people, leverage technology. And as you say, you getting out with the dogs. I'm very lucky. I 2 minutes from my house here, I'm in the New Forest, Hampshire, the New Forest, where the horses run free, the New Forest ponies, etc. And we take the kids and the grandkids, we build dens, we run, we climb trees, and you've got to get back to that. We've got to get back to that. You can see their moods elevated just by, as you say, being outside and doing these sort of activities. And you're right. Martial arts, if you're not in the mode of martial arts, you get a punch in the nose.
Exactly. Well, it's so interesting, Geoff, because I moved to Chicago. I was there 22 years and I absolutely loved it. I met some great friends. I had some great career opportunities. There was so much energy there for a young man. But then as soon as we became parents, my wife and I, we found a place. We have 2 neighbors, and they found this house for us in between them. And it's on 8 acres, and it's in Northwest Indiana, outside of the city. And we are so happy being in the country. I'm surrounded by farmers and farmland, and I go running down the street and I see farm animals. It's so different from the energy in the city. But I think when you're young, you crave the stimulation and the opportunity of city life. But as you get a bit older, like where you live sounds ideal. Taking the grandkids in nature like that, I think it's so important. So, Geoff, now you're a grandfather. What if you were talking to yourself when you were a new father, kind of where I am in life? Do you have a couple of things that you wish you could have told yourself back then when you were younger and you were just starting raising a family?
Yes, without a doubt. My first really successful business, the first successful business that went to over 7 figures, it was a digital print business. In 2006, we were voted Digital Print Company of the Year in the UK. So we were voted as being the best digital print company. I was too attached to that business. I mean, I would spend, even when my partner and I had a level of management that ran the place, and we didn't need to be there, I had times when I was there. And I don't know what I was doing. I was probably just getting in the way. And we ran it like the old Michael Gerber E-Myth so that it would be run without us. But I spent too much time there when I didn't need to be there. And I was talking to a guy, again, last week, a guy who has 64 businesses. And he said, I've had them go bust. I've had them go really well. I'm not attached to any of it. That digital print business of mine was like another child. I got too attached to it. I remember when everybody went home on Christmas Eve, I would stay behind and just walk through the various rooms and the bits of machinery and equipment and I would show gratitude and appreciation, but actually I was too attached to that business.
Geoff, it reminds me of that saying, if you work late, the only people that will remember in 10 years are your kids. But Geoff, the other side of the coin is you were very successful in that business. I'm sure part of the success was because you did care so much. So that's what I think is such a challenge. It's such a balance between the two.
You're so right. You're so right. And I think life goes in phases where those first few years of starting a business, if I'm honest, they were the most exciting years of my life, probably the first 3 years of that business. I didn't have time to think about anything. It was but it was exciting. It was building something. It was creating something. I don't regret any of that. And my wife, she appreciated my children. I mean, I only had 1 child at the time, but they appreciated that I was building something for all of us. So I think you're right. You do need those times where you have to be very careful as you don't make that a habit and you don't make that a pattern. And I went from that into property, where my working week in property, I started around about 10 a.m. on a Monday morning and finished about 3 p.m. on the same Monday. That was my committed week. I obviously did other things because I'm not a person who can sit still, but I made sure I reduced down my commitments where I actually had to be somewhere at a certain time.
So was that a conscious decision as you were getting older to be less tied to a schedule with your career and give you more flexibility for family time and other pursuits?
It was the learning from the print company, and it was just experience taught me that. And I probably made more money from property. When everything's in flow, you make more money anyway. And I think I saw your post about martial arts where when you were wanting to win, when you were competing hard, sometimes it's harder to win. Whereas when you're in flow, when you're doing it almost for the fun of it, you win anyway. And I think I saw that post of yours and loved it because it's my philosophy completely that the martial art I do at the moment is a Russian martial art called Systema. And we have to keep checking in that are you still inside? Because it's all about being calm and still. It's not about raising levels of aggression. It's about actually stilling them and taking the sting out of the situation. And I think if we can take that into all aspects of life, that's when you're in flow.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, I really think what you said is so true. I've got a good friend who always talks about, like, you have certain situations where he calls it the smooth handle, but it's the same kind of thing. You're in flow and things are easy. And then you've got other things in your life where it's like you're trying to force a square peg in a round hole. You just keep trying to force it and it never quite fits. And we're always talking about, it's so hard to decide, especially if you're a type A person, you're used to being successful, you're a winner in life. It's so hard to take a step back and say, okay, you never know if something just needs a bit more effort to succeed, or if it's the wrong battle and you shouldn't even be fighting it and you should walk away. And that's definitely been the case in relationships. I've noticed with a lot of my very successful entrepreneur friends or wealthy friends that are very successful in business, often they have real problems in relationships because they'll get into a relationship with someone who's, I think, fundamentally quite incompatible. But because they're so used to winning through hard work, they'll keep trying to force it and trying to make it work. But you're kind of doomed from the beginning if you're fundamentally different. You're not compatible. So I think that's such a skill in life to decide when to stop fighting and when to keep fighting for things. And I don't have the answers. I just think it's an interesting thing to think about.
And there is the old saying of chase something or someone and they run away from you. Be still and they'll come to you. Be in your own empowerment and they come to you. And we can see the hard hitters. We can see the movers, the shakers. You'll have had part of that as part of you. I had that as part of me. I think it's how you get things done. But I think it's a phase of your life. I think I've seen a lot of people who continue in that vein for their work. They're always forcing, and you can still attain success through this forcing, but it takes its toll. I've seen the physical collapse of various people, the collapse stress-wise, overwhelm, burnout through this force. And hopefully most people, and I try to help people, this is again part of my coaching, to see that there comes a stage, especially in business, where you just don't need to be chasing as much as you did in those early days. It is time to step back. And it's the same with relationships. I worked with a girl, funny enough, she was in America and she was looking at every guy. Could this be the one? But she was always chasing that man. Where was this long-term relationship? And that was creating tension. That was creating pressure. And that was pushing things away, pushing people away from her, because people pick up on that.
Yes.
Yeah, quite sad.
Geoff, as we're both originally from England, I would love to ask you about there was that lovely story about when John Lennon was a boy in school and the teacher was going around the classroom and saying, what do you want to be? And one of the kids would say, I want to be a fireman. And I was like, I'd like to be a policeman. And they said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he said, I want to be happy. And the teacher said, I don't think you understand the question. And he said, I don't think you understand life. And who knows if it's totally true, but I just think it's so beautiful because so many times we do things and we think, if I can accomplish this, if I can meet the woman of my dreams, or if I can build this incredible company, or if I can get status and success in this field, then I'll be happy. So I feel like happiness is the thing that's driving us to do all these things. But in my experience, happiness is a bit more of a byproduct of following your heart. And I think I love people like you, Geoff, and I love your story because like you said, you came from a family of teachers, you started off teaching, but then you came to a point where you said, no, I want to change the course of my life. And then you had your incredible successful company. You went into property management, became successful as a father and now a grandfather. So you've had a lot of different perspectives. But I guess I'm obsessed with the idea of tips and tricks to really find happiness. Do you have any, I'd love to hear, I guess, your thoughts on the different stages of life and the best things to do to maximize your happiness in life. So I think when all said and done, that's the most important metric. At the end of my life, I wanted to say, I'm really happy with what I did. And of course, with hindsight, we'd always do things differently, but I don't want to have regrets because I did the best with what I had at the time.
And I suppose my only way of kind of answering that, because happiness is such a personal thing too. Each person has their view of what do we all want? We all want to be free, don't we? It's freedom we seek. We want the money, so we have the freedom. And we want the businesses, so we make the money, so we have the freedom. I think it's freedom that we all crave, isn't it? Freedom to be who we want to be, do what we want to do, have what we want to have. I don't know if this helps, but if I can give you my massive moment, I put it in the book, and it was my moment when I knew I'd made it, okay? And it's got nothing to do with businesses, and it's got nothing to do with material possessions as such. But as I've mentioned, I mean, I came from a fearful family, a family that feared stepping out, doing anything out of the ordinary. We were an incredibly likable family. Everybody liked us because we'd agree with everyone's opinion. We were people pleasers. We do what people wanted us to do. Anyway, I'd done a lot of personal growth work. I'd had the business. That was all great, etc. But in 2008, I had three massive things happen to me. One, my father died, and I was very close to my father. I mean, my father and I looked the same. In my early days, I was very like, I moved away from that as time went on. I was trying to buy my business partner out of the print company. I was short by the money that I had to buy him out. I was short by 7 figures, and the bank wouldn't lend me the money, so I had to find that. And then in one of my houses, I had an armed gunman. That's a long story, but I had a house of multiple occupations, so with 6 or 7 people in. 6 of them were lovely young nurses, and then I had this armed gunman. Now, I won't go into the detail of all of that because it's quite a long story, but I had these 3 things, and these 3 things came, I know that life gave me them to test me, because the old Geoff would have gone into a corner, sucked my thumb, and been absolutely petrified of the situation. I would have been destroyed by that. What I did the eulogy at my father's funeral, and I kind of looked after my mother, my brothers. I was still. I was calm. I found the money to buy out my partner. I was able. The day I went to tell him we had the money was the day my father died. And he was very angry at the deal that was being done by my business partner, and he threw a chair at me. I didn't tell him my father had died because I didn't want sympathy to be part of the business negotiation. I kept that out of it. So I did the deal with him. He threw this chair, then he sobbed and cried a bit. And then I told him, by the way, I won't be in the office for a few days because my father's died. And to cut a long story short, I got rid of the armed gunman out of the house. I had to meet him one day at the house, and he had 4 thugs on each corner of the street, ready for this to turn into a rock. Anyway, what's this got to do with happiness? I was still inside. I'm not trying. This is not how great am I. This was nothingness. This was no mind. The Zen, no mind. This was me knowing I'd reached a place where I was very comfortable with life, and almost whatever life throws at me, I'm going to be still, I'm going to be happy, I'm going to deal with it. And it was my breakthrough. I think everybody has different breakthrough points.
And Geoff, that's beautiful because that's the Stoic philosophy, isn't it? It's not if I can get X, Y, and Z, then I'll be happy. It's no, life is going to be chaotic, and I'm going to choose to be happy regardless of my circumstance. I'm going to have stillness when I have chaos around me. And I think that's kind of what you're saying too. I know exactly what you mean. That was when you realized that you had the stillness and the strength to overcome all these really hard things that a man has to go through.
And I knew I was the Geoff I'd always wanted to be. I knew that was the Geoff I'd been working towards. And I think happiness is acceptance of what is. And we all know there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, there's going to be U-turns, there's going to be roadblocks. That's just life. But the acceptance of what the universe brings us and our ability to just stay still within that, to me, that's happiness.
That's beautiful.
I hope that does answer your question.
Yes. No, and you also said about, I thought it was really insightful. You said so many people want the money so they can get the freedom. And I think that's exactly the way I always saw money. So in my early 20s, I made a lot of money through trading. And for me, I didn't even buy my first car, I think, till I was already a millionaire. It wasn't about possessions for me. But for me, the money was freedom. So I could stop doing this job I didn't like, and I could stop having a boss treat me badly, and I could just be my own man. And it didn't mean I didn't want to retire and sit on a beach and do nothing. I wanted to do things that fill my cup and that challenge me and enrich me. So for me, money's always been about freedom. But, it sounds like you've been not so wealthy and you've been very successful financially. Can you talk a little bit about how you see money? Because I think one of the problems with a lot of people, and I see this with people around me, is, and I heard a study saying that it didn't matter whatever the person made, whether their net worth was 200,000 or 4 million or 10 million, whatever that was, or 50,000, whatever. It was almost always, they said, if I had 4 times the wealth that I have today, then I'll be happy. So it really wasn't about the number, the material aspect of it. People just think if I have a significant amount more than I have today, then I'll be happy. And I think that's such a fallacy. But I'd love to hear a little bit about how your thoughts on money change when you have this success.
As you said that, I mean, I recall when myself and my business partner, when we hit our first million in the digital print business, I think we high-fived each other, said well done, and then just got on with work. The success of it lasted all of about 2 minutes. It's like we've been working for this. And everybody knows that new coat that you've always wanted, the new car you've always wanted, the new house you've wanted. The excitement of getting that thing lasts a very short amount of time. And therefore, can we all get it? That the material possessions they're okay to have and they're okay to aspire to them. And we all want a comfortable life, but they actually don't. They don't fill our love cup. They don't fill us the happiness void. And hence we see so many people that, are wealthy who, are unhappy in life. I love the Jim Rohn saying of everyone should become a millionaire just for the process they have to go through and the mindset shift they have to go through to become a millionaire. Because anybody who's done it knows that you have to change your being. You have to grow and expand. I mean, I do coach with people who are millionaires and are still growing, and they're okay with that. There are some people who are just geared for expansion. Their mentality, again, it's not the money. It's, look at the likes of Elon Musk, etc. His mentality has got to be expansion. I'm sure he has no concept necessarily of how much money he has, whatever. But he wants to expand his thinking, expand his creativity, expand his growth. And I think some people just have that expansion mentality. And if that fulfills them and keeps them happy, then so be it. Other people don't. I think the sad thing with a lot of the people that come to me for coaching is I'll ask them what do they want in life. And it's usually something like $1 million, £1 million, 10 grand a month. And you go, why? And they don't know. They don't really know. And money becomes the sole value that they base happiness on. And for anybody who's had a bit of success, we know that it's not the money.
Yeah, I think I'm always so grateful that I did get a lot of wealth as a young man, because I realized at an early age that's not all the be all and end all. And so many other things are important. And I feel for people that are striving for that. And they think, if I can just get this, I have a lot of friends who are attorneys. Like, if I can just become partner in my firm, then I'll be happy. And they sacrifice years and years to achieve that. And then often they only realize when they're a lot older, oh, I missed out on my kids growing up, and I've grown apart from my wife, and I've lost contact with all my friends because I was chasing this prestige and wealth, thinking it will be everything, and it's not. And I'm actually obsessed with reading about books. There's one called With the End in Mind by Catherine Maddox, and I've read it twice now, and she talks about, it's hundreds of short chapters. I think it's like 150 short chapters on all these people at the end of their lives, and she either helps them cope with it or she helps their family cope with it. And it's these lessons that it's the same lessons that keep coming back. Like, at the end of people's lives, they're always thinking, I wish I'd lived a life more authentic to me. I wish I cared less about what society or my parents or my friends thought. And I wish I'd spent more time with people I cared about instead of caring about people that don't really matter in the big scheme of things. And it's these same lessons. It's the very simple things that matter in the end. But if you tell someone that, if you tell a young man that, hey, you don't need money to be happy, it's all about these things, it's going to go in one ear and out the other, because they're going to strive. It's innate in our nature. They're going to strive for prestige. It's inbuilt thing in humans. We always want to be higher up in the hierarchy, and we want to have the status and wealth that comes with that. And I just find this stuff so interesting because, again, like I said, I'm thinking about the lessons I want to teach my young son.
Sure. And money is, or the pursuit of money, there's nothing wrong with the pursuit of money in my mind. And it helps one develop skills and most of business is creative. It's creating value. It's creating service. So having been a businessman, and I'm still a businessman, and then I'm a great proponent of business practices, where the pursuit of money is covering a scar inside. A lot of money pursuit or misaligned money pursuit is often a lack of security within the person. There's a lack of security. Maybe they've had an insecure upbringing in their family situation. So it can be covering up some trauma from the past or some wound that needs to be healed. And by all means, pursue the money, but also heal the wound. And they might not find that they need quite as much money to fulfill their happiness.
I absolutely love that. Geoff, this has been such a pleasure. I'll give you the final thoughts or final word, but at geoffsober.com, I'll put a link to your website, and I'm really glad we connected. I'm really grateful to our mutual friend, Sue Sala, for introducing us. She's like, you're going to love Geoff, so I'm really Geoff.
And she said the same about you. You're going to love Lawrence. You're going to get on so well, and we have. I've loved it. I love talking with you.
Oh, thank you so much, Geoff.